Parable of the Unexpected Guest. Once upon a time, there was a knock at my door. I didn't typically get a lot of knocks. I live on the top floor of my building, and at the time at least, most of the other apartments on my floor seemed empty. I kept my door locked anyway, just in case. You can imagine my surprise then when I heard the knock. Now imagine my surprise when I found myself answering it. I wasn't particularly social, to be honest. I avoided others when I could. I tended to think of people generally as two-dimensional, more like objects than people, annoying or dangerous or beneath me, or, I can admit it now, better than me. See what I mean? Not exactly the answer the door type. But this time, for whatever reason, I answered it. And there he was, standing at my door, looking pretty wild too, and not in a particularly attractive Johnny Deppy kind of way. His hair messy, but in a way that suggested fresh air, not neglect. His skin tight, wrinkled around the eyes, not clean exactly, but not unclean either. His eyes, soft, kind, but intense. His clothes, simple and functional, but not quite in style, like he never stopped walking. Of course I recognized him immediately. I guess I should have seen him coming. He looked at me and smiled. I smiled and looked away. "Hey you," he said, "can I come in?" I paused. Just because I knew who he was didn't necessarily mean that I could predict what would happen next, especially since I realized I didn't actually know him well. And yet, there was just something about him standing there. The knock on the door had morphed somehow from an irritation to an invasion to a relief. Now that I had a guest, I suddenly felt less secure in my apartment by myself and more isolated, alone. "Sure," I found myself saying as I stepped aside to let him enter. I still can't say why I did it. What will the neighbors think crossed my mind until I remembered that I didn't really have neighbors. Still, it is mildly scandalous for a single woman to let such an odd-looking man into her home. Maybe that's why I let him in. He came inside. I took his coat and asked if he would remove his shoes, which he did immediately. "Nice to see you, Jesus," I said. I'd known of Jesus from way back, heard the stories, seen the movies, all that stuff. I figured I only had one chance to make an impression, so I glanced self-consciously around my family room, which was very dusty and not so welcoming since I hadn't done much to decorate it. I made a mental note of which parts of my apartment would be off limits during this visit. I offered him a drink. He asked if I had any wine. "How about I get you some water and you make some yourself?" I replied. Being nervous always makes me a little cranky. He laughed. "I was kidding about the wine," he said. "Water would be great." In the kitchen, I quickly pulled one of the really nice glasses off the shelf, poured him some water, added a pair of ice cubes, and at the last minute scattered some store-bought cookies onto a plate. When I re-entered the family room, though, Jesus was gone. Typical, I thought. He must have left. But then I noticed that his shoes were still by the door. I set down the plate and the glass and went after him. Turning a corner, I saw him standing outside my bedroom with a quizzical look on his face. "What's this?" he asked, pointing above the door. "It's a cross," I said. "I would think you'd recognize it." I know, you're not supposed to talk to Jesus like that, but when I get nervous, I get snarky. "I know it's a cross," he said. "I'm wondering why you have it hanging there." I had taken it from my parents' house some time back. I hadn't told them until after the fact. They were fine with it, but still, it didn't exactly belong to me. Technically, I had stolen it. "I don't know," I answered. "I like it, I guess. It's pretty, and it makes me feel safe." It was pretty. Wooden, plated with shiny brass, backed by a thin porcelain circle with some phrase about God watching over us on it. I peeked into my bedroom, nothing incriminating in view, so far as I could see. "I can see why you like it," Jesus said. Was that a smile? "Why don't I show you the rest of the apartment? I grabbed his arm, maybe a bit tighter than was necessary, but I didn't want him wandering off anymore. "That's the office," I said, gesturing to the left. He turned toward it, clearly wanting a closer look. "These are friends of yours?" he asked, admiring the steady flow of pictures on my computer monitor. "Friends and family. I haven't seen most of them in a long time. Do you miss them?" "Some more than others, I guess." I drummed my fingernails against the doorframe. "Have you read all of these?" He motioned to my bookshelf, the crowning glory of my apartment. Keeping a lot of books lying around made me feel smart, but in all honesty, I hadn't read most of them. Suddenly, I felt less intelligent and more, inauthentic. "Who has time to read these days?" I responded. "Let's move on." We stopped at the guest room, which was full of clutter. I could feel my face turning red. "What are these?" Jesus asked, pointing to the bed. "Oh, I'm in the middle of some projects," I responded, twirling a strand of my ponytail around my finger. "I could help you with these, you know." Yes, I did know that. His gaze shifted to the boxes on the floor. "And these?" "Oh, that's just stuff I need to shred. Personal documents, that kind of thing." "I've always been amazed by the shredder," he said. Who knew that Jesus could be amazed? "We use it on the things that are most personal and most private. Legal documents, shredded. Sensitive correspondence, shredded. You'd think people would keep the things that matter the most and destroy the things that matter the least. You'd think we would shred comic books, but instead we shred our secret identities." I'd never thought about it like that. This was the weirdest tour of my home I'd ever been on. "I have more to show you," I told him, pulling him out of the guest room. Apparently the only way to distract him from the clutter here was to show him the clutter somewhere else. I took him back to the family room. That's what I'd come to call it, the family room, even though I live alone. All my roommates had moved on, and instead of replacing them with other roommates, I'd replaced them with stuff. It probably would have made more sense to call this the TV room, but family room had a nicer ring to it. Now, though, I was struck by the irony. There's something intuitively obvious about the fact that homes are meant for relationship, and yet they're often the places we feel most alone. Jesus went straight to the piano, left behind by an old roommate, and he plunked out a few notes. "I love music," he said, as much to himself as to me. "I don't play," I mumbled. "I play the radio." It was a vain attempt at humor, I admit, but it had been one of my grandfather's favorite jokes, so I use it when I can. Jesus looked up and smiled, but didn't laugh. I wondered if he had known my grandfather. He meandered over to my entertainment collection, built over years of visiting used record shops and garage sales. I figured this would take him some time. All that vinyl, all those DVDs merited long and careful study, so I took a seat on the couch. "Quite a mix of music you have here," he commented after a couple of minutes had passed. "Well, I'm eclectic." I was proud of what my collection said about me. "And the movies, how do you decide which ones you have to have?" That was a strange question. I honestly hadn't thought about it. I don't know. Stuff that really moves me, I guess. Stuff that makes me laugh because I see myself in it. Stuff that makes me cry because it reminds me of something or someone. I realized I was asking him, not telling him. Jesus took a seat on my recliner, twisting so that he faced me instead of the television. "Look," he said, "how would you feel about me staying here for a while?" I think I had known it was coming. He had acted just a bit like he owned the place from the moment he had shown up. But it was so rare for me to have visitors, and even rarer for people to stay for longer periods of time. There was something terrifyingly appealing about his suggestion. "Sure," I said, trying to remain calm. "Why not?" At first, it was great. We moved the boxes and unfinished projects from the guest room to the office, so you can have a place to lay your head, I told him. He thought that was clever. We also came up with a plan for him to help me finish each project, and we made good progress on several of them. I got better organized and started hanging on to old letters and stuff instead of shredding everything. He even helped me out with the cleaning and replaced the dead light bulbs for me. I remember thinking, this is the best decision I ever made. Then one day I came home to find Jesus in my family room with 3 people, haggard like him, sitting on my nice furniture. The adults were talking with Jesus. The little girl was playing with a doll. My doll. The one I'd nurtured as a child in ways no one had nurtured me. "Oh, hi," he said to me, like it was nothing that he was entertaining these invaders. "Hi," I replied. I was furious, but I wasn't going to show it. "Hi," the little girl squeaked. "I'm Mary. I like your doll. What's her name?" I wasn't prepared for her to be sweet. I've always called her Maggie. Suddenly I felt conspicuous. Jesus was staring at me with that annoying look of intuition and compassion I had noticed from the beginning. The couple was looking at me too, eyes wide. That's when I figured out I was crying. Not a lot, mind you, just a tear or two. The little girl didn't seem to mind. She kept playing with Maggie, singing a song quietly under her breath. "These folks don't have a place to stay. Do you know anyone who could put them up for the night?" I think Jesus sensed that I was embarrassed, so he changed the subject to something even more embarrassing. "How was I supposed to know where to send homeless people?" "I guess I could call the landlord. She might be willing to let them use one of the vacancies for a couple of days." "Could you? I'll make dinner." What sounds good? He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to them. These dirty people were staying for dinner? Any food allergies? Just fish, thanks. Well, at least we wouldn't be having fish again.